Taylor Swift, the secret battle that forged her empire, and what it cost. A stadium at full volume, a single page in silence. This is the tension that powers the story. When the world believes it owns your voice, how do you take it back and keep it? December 8th, 2024. Confetti drifts like slow snow under stadium lights. 3 hours collapse into a single roar. The Eras Tour has just become the highest-grossing tour in history. But the better question is smaller, colder, and private. What force builds something this loud? A pencil taps a legal pad. Backstage calm before the Grammys. A voice practicing a line she'll soon say into a microphone watched by millions. I would love to tell you that this is the best moment of my life, but I feel this happy when I finish a song. For me, the award is the work. It isn't a slogan, it's a strategy. The secret battle of this life is not a feud, it's authorship as power, and it began far from any stadium. Origin as a compass. A childhood in open fields, a family that chooses proximity over comfort, and a teenager who treats rejection like rehearsal. On a Christmas tree farm outside Wyoming, Pennsylvania, the air smells like sap and kitchen warmth. A kid with a voice bigger than her hands sings for anyone who will listen. County fairs, national anthems, rooms that aren't expecting to be moved. By 11, she isn't just singing, she's sketching melodies that feel like journal entries you can hum. A spiral notebook begins doing a job a spotlight can't, turning feelings into form. Her parents recognize obsession. They choose momentum over nostalgia and move to Hendersonville, Tennessee, close enough to Nashville that possibility is now a commute. Music Row is fluorescent lights and faint smiles. Demo CDs stack up on desks, doors open an inch, then close. She keeps showing up. At 14, she signs a songwriting deal. She studies the machine from the inside. Nights, she plays the Bluebird Cafe. Clinking glasses, forks on plates. Then the hush when a verse lands. A label founder named Scott Borchetta leans in. The big machine contract doesn't make her a star. It hands her a key. She tests the lock. Momentum and fragility arrive together. Success crowds the room. So does the feeling that someone might rewrite your story mid-sentence. Taylor Swift, the 2006 debut, sounds like a thesis with guitars. Tim McGraw slips a diary into the radio and refuses to leave. 2 years later, Fearless scales up the intimacy. Love Story rewires Shakespeare for Friday Night Lights. You Belong With Me turns longing into a hook you can shout with the windows down. Crossover isn't betrayal, it's expansion. At 20, she holds the Grammy for Album of the Year. The trophy glows. The ground under it shifts. September 13th, 2009, the MTV VMAs. She steps to the microphone to say thank you. Another hand takes it. A minute of interruption becomes years of echo. The humiliation is public. The lesson is private. If your story can be yanked away in front of millions, you need a defense that can't be grabbed. She opens a notebook. Authorship becomes shield. Experiment becomes a leap. The page leads the spectacle, not the other way around. Speak Now lands in 2010 as an affidavit. Every song written by her alone. It isn't stubbornness, it's sovereignty. If authorship is questioned, the pages answer. Red arrives in 2012 with restless textures, country edges under pop sheen, electronic brushstrokes pointing at a horizon she isn't supposed to reach yet. The messiness is the point. Life is messy. In 2014, she stops straddling genre and jumps. 1989 is a pop manifesto in neon and midnight glass. It wins Album of the Year. Reinvention isn't a costume change, it's a rite of survival. The diary becomes skyline. The skyline is still built one line at a time. A leak becomes a wildfire. Narrative turns into a weapon, and so does silence. She disappears. Then she reappears in steel. By 2016, the tug-of-war over her image returns with new teeth. A phone call leaks. One word becomes a match. The internet lights up. Strangers assemble a verdict and throw it like a brick. She goes quiet. In the quiet, she recalibrates. Reputation erupts in 2017. Barbed lyrics, maximal production, a stage dragon swallowing the arena's breath. She rides out of its mouth like she planned the ambush. The grin is not an apology. It's a signal. The author is choosing which version of her shows up, not a mask, a boundary. The only way back into public space is through a fortress she built herself. A smaller room with higher stakes. She chooses principle over payout, then moves her voice from melody to civic speech. In a Denver courtroom, she sues a former radio DJ for assault and asks for $1. The amount is the message. The jury believes her. Outside, she writes with the same steadiness she had under oath. My hope is to help those whose voices should also be heard. Therefore, I will be making donations to multiple organizations that help sexual assault victims defend themselves. Attention becomes a tool, not a narcotic. In 2018, after years of public quiet, her feed hosts an endorsement, a caption, a link to register, a clear stance. Within hours, voter registrations surge as young people flood the site she pointed to. Polarizing and plain, silence had begun to feel like abdication. She chooses noise. Contracts, masters, leverage. A loss turns into a blueprint. The question shifts from who is she to who owns what she made. June 2019. She learns the masters of her first 6 albums have been sold to a manager she associates with incessant, manipulative bullying. She calls it her worst-case scenario. A year later, the masters sell again to a private equity firm. She tells fans she refused to sign what her team called an ironclad NDA that would bar her from speaking negatively about the buyer as a condition to view financials, and that these master recordings were not for sale to me. So she announces a plan that sounds like myth until it becomes logistics. Re-record everything, track by track, and invite the world to treat the new versions as canon. It's radical because contracts don't yield to sentiment, but she has leverage no clause anticipated, a direct line to the audience. Each release wears a seal, Taylor's version, so fans, radio, and film supervisors know which copy routes power back to the author. The work is forensic and devotional, tone-matching old takes without embalming them, restitching harmonies, rebuilding arrangements, and opening vaults of unreleased songs that make old eras clearer. Streams migrate, playlists update, the market speaks in behavior. When the story is strong, the audience will choose the ethical version on purpose. Her new deal with Republic Universal guarantees ownership of future masters and includes a provision that if Universal sells its Spotify equity, proceeds are shared with artists on a non-recoupable basis. Values codified. The teenage insistence on authorship now lives in legal language most people never see and that younger artists can point to. The stadiums close. The clock stops. In the silence, she changes color and extends authorship into film, while a documentary exposes the costs no chart can tally. 2020, empty calendars. Folklore arrives July 24th without a parade. It whispers and carries. Characters populate invented towns. The songwriting turns the room into a cabin, the summer into a sweater. Evermore lands December 11th like a winter twin. The risk? Shifting sound without warning becomes a reintroduction. Songwriter first, pop star sometimes, storyteller always. A song turns cinematic. All Too Well, the short film, frames a decade-loved track with carefully measured glances and silence. It wins a Grammy for Best Music Video. That same season, she performs the 10-minute version on live television and turns a late-night stage into a communal rereading of a past self. The same editor's mind that writes bridges can cut scenes. The author is now directing. Miss Americana shows a ledger rarely put on screen. Body image pressure, the pull of applause, the moral calculus of when to speak. In a 2023 profile, she says, "This is the proudest and happiest I've ever felt, and the most creatively fulfilled and free I've ever been. The freedom feels earned, not granted." A sleepless record, a ticketing quake, and a tour that behaves like an economy. Systems buckle. She writes new rules in public. Late 2022, Midnights arrives like insomnia with glitter. Synths pulse like an anxious heartbeat. The lyrics confess with eyeliner smudged but precise. In 1 week, she occupies the entire Billboard Hot 100 top 10. Then she announces the Eras Tour, a life's work staged as time travel. Demand melts the ticketing system. Politicians ask questions. In 2024, the Justice Department cites the fiasco as part of a larger antitrust case against Live Nation Ticketmaster. When one artist's tour becomes evidence in a federal lawsuit, you've left celebrity and entered policy. March 2023, opening night. The setlist is a pilgrimage through selves. Teenage diarist, pop architect, woodland monologist, litigator of her own contracts. For more than 3 hours, she keeps velocity while sneaking quiet into thousands of throats. 2 acoustic surprise songs each night turn a stadium into a living room for 5 minutes. Cities swell around show dates. Analysts measure Swiftonomics in hotel occupancy, restaurant receipts, transit maps. Even a Federal Reserve report notes a boost. By the final bow in December 2024, the tour's estimated gross clears every record, about $2.2 billion. Numbers can be vulgar. Here, they measure belonging. Then she bottles the tour for theaters and swerves around the studio system, partnering directly with AMC. The concert film becomes the highest grossing of its kind, costing roughly $260 million. Direct distribution, direct profit, fewer middlemen. The bet is simple. If you own the audience relationship, you can renegotiate the route from stage to screen. The box office replies with a yes loud enough to echo. Peak power has a price. We step into the training room, the private giving, the contradictions she learns to hold, and the small rooms where everything changed. February 2024. She accepts a 4th Grammy for Album of the Year, Midnights, becoming the first artist to reach that mark. From that height, she announces the Tortured Poets Department. On release day, it shatters streaming records. The first album to cross 300 million streams in 24 hours. Fortnite sets a single-day song record. That night, she drops an expanded edition. In an era that rewards brevity, she builds mazes and invites everyone to get lost together. That spring, Forbes lists her as a billionaire. The composition matters. It's built primarily on songwriting and live performance, not a beverage line or a fashion house. Narrative control has become a balance sheet. But the bill arrives. She trades anonymity for agency. The 13s scrawled on hands and the Easter egg riddles aren't just fan catnip. They're a system for directing attention instead of being drowned by it. Boundaries replace spontaneity. Rest becomes suspicious. Training reads like a monastic sprint. Treadmill runs while singing, months of dance rehearsal, breath control drilled until it's muscle memory. 3 hours of voice and movement at stadium volume look effortless only because effort has been treated like a religion. The generosity often runs quieter than the noise around it. On tour, food banks from the US to the UK receive donations that refill shelves in a night. Crew members, the people who keep the moving city moving, receive bonuses that say the quiet part. This is a village, not a solo act. Years earlier, the Taylor Swift Education Center opens at the Country Music Hall of Fame, funded by her gift. In private moments of public crisis, checks arrive without a press conference. The pattern is simple. speak loudly about art, quietly about aid. Her contradictions remain human, not ornamental. She is both tender and implacable. She stares down an arena and agonizes over a single caption. She writes choruses that turn strangers into a choir, then channels that choir to move markets, push policy, or rewire contracts. She lets us hear her flinch at body commentary, then builds a carapace strong enough to stand unblinking under 70,000 eyes. These aren't poses. They are the cost of staying yourself while being watched. Now, the rooms where it changed. A hotel room in New York the morning after the 2009 VMAs. The phone vibrates like a fault line, half sympathy, half advice. She opens a notebook and writes a definition no one can snatch on live TV. A fluorescent courtroom in 2017. Air conditioning hums. Coffee goes stale. She asks for $1 and learns how truth sounds without melody. The verdict lands. The principle holds. A kitchen table in 2019. Laptop glow. A sentence she knows will be called dramatic. She writes it anyway. An NDA is declined. The refusal costs convenience. It buys clarity. A windowless studio in 2021. The click track nags memory. She sings not to sound younger, but to sound like the person who wrote those songs and understands now why she had to. A banner reads Taylor's version not as swagger, but as instruction. Supervisors take note. Sync requests begin following consent. A concrete tunnel in March 2023. Tuning seeps through cinder block. A dancer counts under breath. Above, a mother finds seats next to a teenager who learned to read on lyric booklets. The curtain parts. The roar doesn't end. It just changes register. And the blueprint in motion. Published values until they can be written into contracts. Master ownership wasn't a perk. It was insistence made policy. Treat distribution as a creative decision. If the middle layer doesn't add value, route around it. Write bridges that change both ends of a song. The span between losing masters and Taylor's version is an engineered middle that changed the industry's map. Build an audience that behaves like infrastructure. They solve clues, move streams, push re-records into the canon, and reveal inefficiencies big enough to pull lawmakers to microphones. She didn't inherit that machine. She built it by being consistent enough that millions volunteered to be a gear. No recap, just forward motion. The stadium thunders fade. The pencil returns. The risk of building a machine this efficient is becoming it. Boundaries blur. Every interaction can feel instrumental. She's spoken about the pressure it places on body and mind, and you can see it in the monk-athlete discipline behind the glitter. To survive the scale, the diary has to remain louder than the discourse. Outside, governments cite tour impact in economic reports. The Justice Department names her ticket chaos as evidence in a monopoly case. Inside offices most of us will never enter, a 19-year-old and their lawyer slide a printout across a table that says, in effect, this is what ownership looks like now. And then, smaller rooms. A rehearsal studio, months before opening night. The treadmill hums. She runs and sings, stitching lungs to lyrics. Choreographer counts. Repetition, boring up close, turns mortal into myth. A conference room where a release strategy becomes a negotiation. What if theaters, not studios? What if the audience is the partner? Questions scribbled on a whiteboard become an artist-first contract. A desk lamp in the small hours of October 2022. Tabs scattered like constellations. At midnight, Midnight's drops, and by morning the charts redraw themselves. Inside the room, the scratch of a pencil sounds exactly like it did at the beginning. What happens after the biggest tour in history goes dark? The bus is idle, the crew coils cable. Somewhere, a door closes, and the person at the center of all this sits back down at a table with a blank page. She circles a phrase, crosses it out, circles another. The work, the real work, starts there again. If you want to know what comes next,
listen for the bridge she hasn't built yet. That's where she tends to change everything.